2023 FIDE World Chess Championship game number 2. We have Liren with the white pieces, Jan Nepomniachtchi with the black pieces, and we have some excitement in store for you today. So stay tuned till the end. We got d4, knight f6, c4, e6. These are all standard moves by the players so far. Jan used to play g6 quite a bit, but recently he's been playing e6, so this is all expected. Now at this point, usually you see one of two options. You'll see knight to c3, which heads towards what's called a Rogozin, or pawn to g3, which goes towards a Catalan. But here, Ding plays h3, and this is an extremely rare move. It's been played by about a dozen players, but none of them are super grandmasters. And I think this is something where Ding wanted to get Jan out of his preparation, and I believe it works. So after d takes c4, e3, now we're headed towards a Queen's Gambit accepted structure. So it's not a Rogozin, and it's not a Catalan. We got something completely new, and I don't think Jan expected this. So it's kind of a Queen's Gambit accepted, except there's this pawn on h3. So c5 by Jan, standard plan in the Queen's Gambit. You try to trade a flank pawn for a center pawn. Bishop takes c4, pawn to a6. And the idea here is to play b5, kicking this bishop away, and bishop to b7. So that's how black will complete development. Castle, knight c6, knight c3. And at this point, I think you could claim that Ding got the advantage out of the opening. It's a small edge, but he's very solid. And I think Jan's in a position that maybe he didn't want to find himself in with this Queen's Gambit accepted structure. b5, bishop d3. Bishop to b7. Now we see a4 by Ding. Both players are playing quality moves. a4, the idea is you're threatening to win this pawn. A takes b5. And if the pawn pushes, then it creates some holes. So b4 played, but now you see this c4 square is open. This pawn is also attacked by the bishop. And if these two pawns trade, that may make this pawn on b4 a weakness later. So keep an eye on that. Knight to e4 played by Ding, and it looks like Ding is the aggressor so far. He's now double attacking this pawn. Both pawn and knight could take, and Jan is kind of trying to react to Ding's moves. Jan's having to react to that early h3 move. Jan's having to react to a4, reacting to knight e4. So Ding is playing with the initiative currently. Knight to a5. Now we see a bit of fighting chess coming back from Jan. This opens up the bishop. So there's a double attack on the e4 knight. Also, this knight on a5 hints that maybe Jan will push past and create this 3-pawn versus 2-pawn situation on the queen side. So sometimes in the Queen's Gambit accepted, these 2 pawns trade. All the pawns are symmetric, and those types of positions head to draws more often than not at the top level. But we might see some excitement if this pawn pushes ahead to c4. Knight takes f6 check. This was played by Ding, and the commentators for chess.com were surprised by this move. Knight takes c5 has to be considered here. And after bishop takes c5, d takes c, this is an extra pawn for Ding. And the top move for black is bishop to e4. And after this trade, this pawn on c4 probably will get captured, but it takes a bit of time. Pawn on c5, excuse me, because it could play to c6. And after knight takes c6, bishop d2. And yeah, you could claim an advantage here for white. I'm looking at the engine and it's saying plus 0.8. So black's just having a little bit of trouble holding on to this b pawn in the end. And white's getting a bit more active. Okay, so Ding did not go for that though. Knight takes c5 would have been a way to play for the advantage. Instead, he takes on f6. And now g takes f6 played by Jan. And all of a sudden, you can tell we're in for some excitement. Look at this half-open file. Rook to g8 coming, attacking g2. In combination with that bishop on b7, pointing at g2. I think we're in for a fight, and maybe we'll see a decisive result today. So e4 played by Ding. Very tiny mistake. I gave this a dubious mark. This allows black to play c4 and play for a small advantage. What Ding should play here is d takes c5 again. So for some reason, Ding did not want that trade. I'm not sure if it's because he was playing for a win, or maybe there was some other positional factor that he was thinking, like, oh, I don't want Jan to have that bishop coming out to c5. but he did not go for it. E4 played, but this is kind of a common idea as well in the Queen's Gambit. It just gives Jan that little extra to play with, pawn to c4. So now let's compare the imbalances. On the Queen side, we see these 3 pawns for Jan, 2 pawns for Ding. So this is a potential passed pawn on c3. We look at the center, Ding's got the 2 awesome center pawns. Look at that full control of the center. Jan does not have much going on in the center. Then on the Queen side, this king is tucked away safely on g1. That king is pretty safe on e8, but he's not castled yet. And Jan gets the rook coming to the g file quickly. So I think you could argue that Jan has the play on the king side, Jan has the play on the queen side, and Ding has the play in the center. And the center tends to be more important than either of the flanks. So we got a very interesting dynamic going on here. Bishop c2 played, queen c7, and now it looks like Jan wants to castle queen side. So we're going to see opposite side castling position. Those tend to lead to fighting chess. Bishop to d2. And Ding is making good moves here, trying to untangle. Rook to g8 played. Jan is looking for fun, looking to attack down the g file. Here the top move is queen to e1. That puts a double attack on this b pawn. So if Ding plays queen e1 here, and let's say Jan tries to queenside castle, this pawn can be captured by Ding. So that's the top move. Ding played rook to c1 in the game, which allows Jan to castle queenside. So Jan's kind of getting everything he wants in this position. The advantage is still very small though for Jan. Bishop to d3 by Ding, and this is the first mistake of the game. It's kind of deep. Why is this a mistake? It looks good, right? The rook on the c file pins this c pawn to black's queen. But the problem with bishop to d3 is once the king and queen move, now the bishop doesn't want to be on d3. And the bishop on d3 doesn't want to head to e2. It's actually stronger supporting this e pawn because this bishop applies pressure. So that means this bishop may have to retreat later. So first mistake of the game by Ding. King to b8. Strongest move on the board by Jan. I gave this an exclamation point. It's getting the king off the file of the rook. And when this queen moves later, then Ding has to think about, okay, is the pawn going to capture the bishop again? Rook to e1 played. It's another little mistake by Ding. The top move is actually bishop back to c2. That's a really hard move to play. Admitting your mistake and just retreating a piece to where it came from, the previous move. Not many players are good at that. So here Ding goes rook to e1. Watch for this queen to move soon, creating a threat on d3. f5 played, another excellent move by Jan. So he just played king to b8, a great find, and now he plays f5, another great find. He is on great form today. And one plan for black is to play f6 and queen g7 potentially. I was watching the commentary, and one thing that Anish Giri said on the broadcast was this is a committal move, and Jan played it very quickly, and he actually said that there was no reason to play that so quickly, but that's something that Jan does. It's part of his style. He plays decisive, aggressive moves, and he plays them very quickly sometimes. It can backfire, but it can also rattle the opponent. Bishop c2 played. Now we finally see that bishop going right back to where he came from. That's a tough move to play, but Ding finds it. Knight to c6. This was the worst piece on the board for black. The knight was out on a5, but really all the play is on the king side currently. So Jan brings this back to the center. This threatens to play knight takes d4 potentially. And I think this is something that we can take away from it as non-super GMs. The idea here is improve your worst piece, bring a knight to the center. As the knight on the rim is dim, it only controls a few squares over there, 4 squares. But when the knight gets back to c6, now it controls 8 squares. So you always want to have your knights closer to the center of the board. Bishop to g5 by Ding. This is a good move. It changes the nature of the position, so things were kind of going downhill for Ding. And when things aren't in your favor, you need to look to create some different imbalances, and that's what he's doing here. And there's only one move for Jan that really holds the large advantage, and he does find it, and I'm giving it a brilliant mark. It is rook takes g5, exchange sacrifice, rook for a bishop. So you're trading a 5-point piece, this rook for a 3-point piece. That's called an exchange sacrifice. Knight takes g5 played. And here, knight takes d4 by Jan. So if you look at the material count, you do see the +1 for Ding. There's a rook for a piece and a pawn, but +1 means that Jan probably has some compensation for that pawn. And indeed, if you look at the engine, it's saying about -1.9. So if Ding is +1 and the engine says -2, for example, that's about 3 points of compensation in terms of activity. So Jan has a lot of attacking chances here. Let's look at some potential plans. Pawn to f6, something we talked about before, kicking this knight on g5, bringing the queen over to g7 potentially. And there's also some queenside threats. Like you have to watch for pawn to b3, for example, forcing that bishop all the way back to b1. And then maybe later on, this pawn goes to c3 and black gets a passed pawn coming up. So again, kingside over here and queenside over here, both sides favor Jan. And now the center control, I would say, is about equal. This d4 pawn was lost by Ding. So what is Ding playing for now? The material advantage. He's got the extra rook. Can he make use of it? All right, so queen h5 by Ding. This is a good move. He's poking at these pawns. And the pawns are becoming a bit weak. Jan has to find something concrete here. And he finds the best move again. Pawn to f6. Tempting Ding to take this pawn, after which bishop to c5 improves the worst piece again by Jan. And now look at every piece has a job. Both bishops on the long diagonal. This knight is eyeing these squares, but also helping out on the queen side. This queen is doing a nice job kind of protecting the c pawn, also keeping an eye on the white king. This rook is on the open file. Every piece is good for Jan. Ding's pieces are all playing passively. Defense, defense, defense. These two are kind of aggressive, but they're over off on the h file out of the game. This is not what Ding wanted, so he did not play knight takes h7. He did not go for the pawn. He retreats. Knight back to f3. Knight takes c2 by Jan. He is finding top move after top move. This c pawn is really powerful. It's about to become a pass pawn, and these bishops are also super powerful like we just showed. Man, Jan is playing great chess so far. Rook takes c2. Bishop takes e4. So now if we do a material count, there is a bishop and 2 pawns for a rook. So 5 points for 5 points. And there's also the bishop pair advantage for Jan. So whenever you have 2 bishops, they can work really well together on an open board, and that's what we see here. Rook to d2 played, offering an exchange of rooks. This is a common idea. If you have 2 rooks against 1, and you're up the exchange, like Ding is here, you can try to trade off one set of rooks, and then your additional rook, your extra rook, becomes stronger because your opponent doesn't have a rook to compete against it. Bishop to d6, king to h1. You can tell Jan is feeling the advantage. Ding's time was under 5 minutes at this point, and Jan had 38 minutes. So similar to game 1, Ding's under early time pressure. Jan's playing confidently, pressing for a win. This is a much larger advantage than Jan had at any point, though, in game number 1. And it's starting to feel a little bit helpless for Ding. What's the idea behind king h1? And I was watching the live broadcast, and Jan kind of made a face after this move, like, what are you doing with king h1? Show me the idea. And he instantly snaps out this move. Pawn to c3, top move again. And Ding must have considered this. So what does he have in mind? Pawn to c3 is about to create a passed pawn after it trades for the b pawn. Ding immediately captures. Jan immediately captures back. And then Ding plays rook to d4. So this was his plan after the king h1 move. And Jan just instantly plays c2. Jan is not fazed at all by Ding's moves. And he is about to promote this to a queen. Really strong move. Queen to h6 played by Ding. Guarding this c1 square with both pieces. And now Jan plays e5. Look at the rook on d4. Which squares are available? Covered, covered, covered. d2 allows queening. Covered, covered, covered. Loses material. Ding resigns. 29 moves in. Jan Nepomniachtchi completely crushes Ding Liren with the black pieces. Played faster. Played extremely accurate, attacked, and just blew him off the board. So we have a 1-point lead for Jan Nepomniachtchi after 2 games. The next game is in 2 days. And if you guys want your games reviewed, we have a game analysis coming up. check out the link in the description, and we will see you in 2 days for the next recap. Thanks for watching.